MegaHerzzz. You're listening to MegaHerzzz on 4ZZZ.
You're listening to MegaHerzzz on 4ZZZ. My name is Charlotte. My pronouns are she, they. I'm on my own today, which is my first solo episode, I think. So, yeah, bear with me today. Happy winter solstice, everyone. I hope everyone had a lovely day yesterday. I would just like to start off with acknowledging the Jagera and Turrbal peoples as the sovereign owners of the unceded land on which we live and broadcast here today. I've written a little bit of things that I'm going to share with you guys, but we're going to talk a little bit about Pauline Hanson because, you know, who isn't talking about her at the moment? She's in the Zeitgeist at the moment, whether we like it or not. So Pauline Hanson has seemingly increasingly gained popularity over the past few months. I know there is some kind of data out there to, you know, question the validity of polling and how they do polling and who they poll and all that kind of stuff. But we can't deny that she is kind of in the media at the moment. She is making a lot of points. She is doing a lot of advertising around One Nation and all that kind of stuff. So whether or not we like it, there are some polls that are demonstrating One Nation is now even polling higher than Labour. There is no federal election happening until 2028, I believe. So hopefully there will be time for, you know, this kind of popularity to fizzle out by then. I also assume that 4ZZZ listeners are not necessarily the audience. But just in case, I wanted to share some of her stances that will affect women and, just kind of approaching it from a feminist lens, I guess. But I think, overall, the main kind of thing is if you have issues with specific types of women, i.e. trans women, immigrant women, and First Nations women, this does impact all women. So, I think that a lot of the things that she talks about are definitely feminist issues. So let's look a little bit into kind of, I would say, 3 specific issues that were brought up in the national press speech recently. So first one is paid parental leave. So Pauline Hanson suggested that women should not get paid by their employers while on maternity leave during her national press release. She also hinted at some major changes to the childcare system and called for income splitting for families to help incentivise parents staying home with their children. In her speech, Pauline said, if women take time off and they're not paid their wages because they're not working, fair enough. Why should businesses pay? But they're not at work. That's the difference. That's why the pay gap is there. So those listeners who do understand the gender pay gap know that parental leave is an extremely important part of maintaining women's decision-making, financial independence, and overall ability to participate in public life. The gender pay gap is quite a complex concept that has many, many factors, one of which is that people who have children are not afforded the same opportunities to get back into the workforce as perhaps like fathers are, and often miss out, on getting back into work. And it's a lot more of a complex issue than, well, they're not at work, so they don't get paid. And if you are interested in a whole kind of pay gap episode, I think it is quite an interesting concept that there are a lot of mistruths or misunderstandings about. It's not necessarily like same pay for the same kind of work. And parental leave is a really big part of the gender pay gap, and I think a really important issue. So that, Pauline Hanson just suggesting that we get rid of parental leave is, not a win for women at all. We also know that women being able to return to the workforce and having flexible options is actually a benefit for businesses. There's an independent economist called Sylvia Griselda who said in a Guardian article, I believe, that, in quotations, women on average tend to be more educated than men. So if you're asking half the workforce to not work, ... it means that we are kind of limiting the growth and the productivity of the Australian economy. And if there is a shortage of skills in Australia, Australia has to overcome that through immigration. I think that's a really interesting perspective. Obviously, I kind of look at parental leave from the perspective of, empowering women to get back into the workforce, to allowing them to have a life outside of the home. But also, if you are approaching it from that business kind of angle, it's also, parental leave is also a win for businesses as well. because women, have value in the workplace. They have really valuable skills in education. So, yeah, an interesting point. And, that little point about immigration kind of leads into, obviously, the next huge topic for One Nation is immigration. So One Nation, and this is from One Nation's own website, they say their immigration stance is basically that Australia is being swamped by overseas arrivals. Pauline has implied that immigration has led to the housing supply shortages and infrastructure crunch happening in major cities. Their core policies around immigration are basically they want to deport 75,000 illegal immigrants. They want to cap visas at 130,000 per year to ease pressure on housing, wages and infrastructure. Stop the skilled visa rorting that allows cheap foreign labour to undercut Australian workers. Very strange. They want to end student visa loopholes, deport any visa holder who breaks the law. They want to introduce an 8-year waiting period for citizenship and welfare. They want to refuse entry to migrants from nations known to foster extremist ideologies. And they want to withdraw from the UN Refugee Convention. So these are obviously all pretty hardcore, and I would personally probably say racist, but, that's my opinion. I would say I think immigration is a feminist issue because, every policy I think has a gendered aspect that is often ignored. Women and girls make up nearly half of all international migrants, and they do face unique and intersecting vulnerabilities, which include things like gendered violence, systemic labour exploitation, and limited access to reproductive health care. So I think that if you care about women, you must care about providing pathways to citizenship, independence, and safety for immigrant women in Australia. There's also, even if they don't end up getting in and actually enforcing any of these things, I think that this type of rhetoric is really I think it just encourages racism from people on a wider scale. We kind of saw the stuff with the same kind of thing with Trump's policies. I think it just really encourages people who are racist to kind of come out of the woodwork, use those policies as a way to, kind of spread their own agenda. And I just think it's not safe. None of it is accurate either. Housing is not an immigration issue. That is, we can get into it a bit later, but that is not an issue that is caused by immigrants. That is a issue that is caused by, government policy and the elite class, kind of hoarding all the wealth in the houses. It's not actually anything to do with immigration. But so that's also a really feminist issue that you should care about if you're a feminist. And then finally, perhaps the most bizarre part of Pauline Hanson's speech, although maybe not bizarre in this current transphobic climate, was her call against the urgent national threat of transgender insurgency. Without offering any evidence, Hanson said almost every instrument of government was dedicated to a transgender ideology seeking to redefine humanity. She believes trans propaganda is being imposed on school children and hit out at efforts to track diversity in workplaces. She says, in quotations, "This transgender movement is a militant force right throughout society and must be confronted." That's all pretty bad. So whether or not you think people take Pauline Hanson seriously, I think those sentiments are actually those are things that I've heard people say to me in real life. All the stuff about, trans propaganda in schools and things like that. Those are legit things that I've had people say to me in real life. And I think her words definitely reflect the ongoing anti-trans rhetoric we're seeing on a societal and systemic level, in Australia, but also all across the world. We're seeing all this really crazy law and policy changes to kind of focus on whatever they think that trans people are doing, I guess. So trans rights are absolutely a feminist issue. The trans rights and feminist movements both seek to challenge strict patriarchal, gender roles and work to dismantle discrimination faced by those who transgress societal norms. So I think that protection for our trans sisters only means increased protections for all women. So if you agree with, those things, I think definitely need to do some inward reflection, I think. Now, I do understand why people are growing increasingly fatigued and disillusioned by the major two parties and the lack of support or progress to kind of helping the everyday person, I guess. I completely do understand this. However, I think it's so important to remember that these issues are not the fault of our most vulnerable in society, like immigrants, like trans people. It's absolutely the fault of the elite class in Australia, the big corporations and the billionaires who destroy the planet, hoard the wealth, and like aren't held accountable for it. So yeah, I think those are just all really important things to remember when you're kind of hearing this rhetoric. And I know it can feel a little bit kind of helpless, I think, when you read all this and you're just like, oh, well, everyone's going to vote for one nation, and it just kind of feels a bit, bleak and grim. But I think, I still have hope that, unity and care will kind of overcome. And yeah, if we, knowing this kind of sentiment so far out from a federal election, I think is actually a win, because it gives us, plenty of time to help, kind of rectify these things, to spread the right information, we can rally, we can advocate, and I think hopefully, this isn't something that will go on forever. And if you have people in your life who are, kind of spouting these things to you, I'm really sorry, first of all, but maybe you can text in and let us know, like, your tips and your tricks for kind of combating and arguing with and, debating these kinds of topics to make it a little bit easier for all of us to fight the good fight. And interestingly, the Daily Oz Instagram account has posted a little breakdown of One Nation's policies as well. And there's a couple of things I forgot to talk about. So from the kind of health angle, One Nation also proposes to reduce the gestational limit for abortions, I think down to 20 weeks is what I read, but it might be something different, and implement counselling for women considering an abortion. They also want to establish a royal commission into the management of COVID-19 by Australian governments. One Nation opposes COVID-19 vaccine mandates. So, a lot of kind of interesting things happening from One Nation. Obviously, reducing, putting any kind of barriers into abortion access for women, obviously not good, and not very feminist. So, once again, if you care about women, definitely have a look into the policies that are being proposed. I also mentioned before that there's some kind of doubt around polling and how it all works and all that. And the Daily Oz have actually they have a little section on this here, so I can get into that a little bit more. So One Nation has been surging the polls. So here's a quick reminder on how polling works. So the Daily Oz says research companies that conduct public opinion polls and surveys are known as pollsters. In Australia, media companies commission polling firms to research voter sentiment and public opinion. Polling companies often ask people via online panels, phone interviews and text messages which party they would rank first on their ballot if an election were held tomorrow and who they would prefer as Prime Minister. So how do they get results that are representative? One method used by some companies is multi-level regression with post-stratification, thankfully known by its acronym MRP. So MRP uses demographic characteristics such as age, gender, education level, and location to identify voting patterns. Pollsters also consider how different demographic groups have voted in the past. Ultimately, polls use the responses of a relatively small group, usually at least 1,000 people, to make informed estimates about the views of the broader population. So just a reminder, polls are not predictions, they are snapshots of public opinion at a particular moment in time. And I think that's a really great reminder in this current climate. Now is normally the time where we get into the Femicide report. We have a commitment every week on MegaHerzzz to report on women in this country who are killed. But in really incredible news, it does seem that there have been no women killed this past week, reported by Sherele Moody at least. While it is a grim thought that this is something to celebrate, I'm going to take it as a little win and say, that's great that we don't have anything to report, and that's the first time that's happened since I've been on this show. So, I think that is a good thing. My heart really goes out to all the women who have been lost this year. Rest in power. Everyone, please go support Sherele Moody's work. She's still trying to get an inquiry into femicides in Australia. Sign her petition, follow her work. She's such an important part of our community. And once again, if you are experiencing any distress or anything around your own experiences of violence, of other people's experiences of violence, of any kind of, feelings about this, you can call 1-800-RESPECT 24/7. for counsellors, just to talk things through. Their number is 1-800-737-732. And if you are in crisis, if you are in danger and you need to get out of your home and you need support, please call DV Connect. The number is 1-800-811-811. And if you are a man who is experiencing violence or think that you are at risk of perpetrating violence, please call DV Connect Men's Line. Their number is 1-800-600-636. We are coming up to the end of our show. We've also got a text in from Danny saying, Sherele, Moody tip, I buy her t-shirts as presents for all my friends. Everyone wins. I think that is a wonderful, easy way to, support Sherele Moody's work. And you're right. Everyone does win. You get a cool t-shirt. You get to support a great cause. What a great idea, Danny. Thank you. Some upcoming events this weekend. I haven't been able to find heaps. So if you have some great femme-fronted gigs coming up, please send it into our Instagram at MegaHerzzz 4ZZZ, I believe is the username. Yeah. So DM us or send us a text or anything like that. Super keen to share any femme-fronted gigs that are coming out. But this weekend, you might have heard already, there's the Winter Solstice Festival, 27th of June, 2 to 10 p.m. I think 4ZZZ will have we've got volunteers floating around that day. I'm not sure if we have a stall, but definitely lots of 4ZZZ support that day. Featuring local artists, Tajaka, Monique, Claire, Leve, Jamisha, Lost Houseplants, FC, and more. There's also workshops, solstice ceremonies, food markets, and family-friendly activities. There's also a lesbian R&B dance party happening on the 27th, run by Paf, who is a DJ, writer, and cultural producer. This is happening at Pawn & Co. in the Valley from 8 p.m. Sounds like a great time. I've never been to Pawn & Co., but it looks really cool. So definitely head on down to that if that sounds like your scene. We'd also like to shout out Femme Fatale's first birthday celebration, which is happening, I think, next week or week after. It's on 3rd of July. So you've got a little bit of time to buy some tickets. Yep, that'll be next Friday. It's their first birthday, so it's an incredible milestone for an incredible show. Their lineup includes Jean, Creeping Jenny, Charlotte Mead, and Wisher. Free entry in all ages. What more could you want from what an incredible show? Also not necessarily a gig, but the state budget comes out tomorrow, so maybe next week we can do a little gendered lens reading of the budget for the state. Surely some interesting things to come out of that, and would love to kind of dissect the wins and the losses for women and gender diverse people and anyone else as part of our audience. I think that would be really interesting.
Isn't that what feminism is about?